Okay, so we're ready to get started. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world joining us today for this latest episode of our virtual tech meetup series. It's my great pleasure today to be introducing Anuradha Kumari, who will today be talking about making accessible websites with Semantic HTML. Before we dive in, just a quick word from our sponsors. So today's meetup is brought to you by LogRocket. I'm sure the vast majority of you tuning in today came today via our blog. We also have a great product for when you're building and fixing applications. LogRocket is a front-end application monitoring solution that combines error tracking, digital experience monitoring, performance monitoring, infrastructure monitoring, and web analytics all rolled into one. So your engineering teams, your product teams can all use a single source of truth to look at all of these aspects of app development, allowing for more efficient remediation of problems and iterations of feature sets and so on. In addition, you can integrate all of this with your backend monitoring tools. For more information, head over to logrocket.com and get a personalized demo, or sign up with a free account and get a taste of what our solution can do for you. Now, with all of that out of the way, I'd like to welcome Anuradha to give her talk. Just so you know, a recording of this will be sent to you, in addition to being uploaded to our YouTube channel, where you can also watch previous editions of our meetup series. Additionally, we also have another meetup next week on August 17th. Should you use Chrome as your IDE, you can sign up at blog.logrocket.com/tech-meetups. If you have any questions during this webinar, please leave them in the chat and I'll try and get to them at the end. Now, without further ado, take it away, Anuradha.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jack. And hi, everyone. First of all, thanks a lot to LogRocket for this meetup and Jack for hosting it. So, hey, everyone, as Jack said, my name is Anuradha and, well, yeah, let me share my screen. Okay. Yeah. Cool. So, and today I will be talking about creating accessible websites with Semantic HTML. Before we start, a bit of introduction. I'm working as a front-end consultant in Netherlands, and I'm a Google Developer Expert for Web, Microsoft MVP, Cloudinary MDE, and Women Tech Makers Ambassador. I'm also an accessibility advocate, so you will find me a lot talking about accessibility on various topics. And if you would like to connect with me, and if you have any questions even after the talk today, you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn at Anuradha15 and Twitter at miracle_404. I'd love to connect and discuss more on accessibility. So let's get started. The topics which we are going to cover today. So we'll start with some basic introduction of accessibility, why it is important. Then we will see HTML and its semantics. We will also dive a bit into accessibility tree because it is very important to understand accessibility. And then we will see how can using semantic HTML help us with web accessibility. So first and foremost, what exactly is web accessibility? So accessibility, or it is also neuronamed as A11Y, where 11 refers to the number of letters between A and Y. So it means making resources and services usable by everyone, which includes disabled users. And why it is important, why should we care about accessibility? So we should care about accessibility because whatever we build it for our users, and we do not know what our users could be going through or how they would be using our websites. We don't know much about their disabilities or their situations, and there are different ways in which users use our web. So for example, they can use a mouse, they can also use just keyboard to navigate, they can also use a device called switch, which is basically just 0-1 input. So they don't have multiple keys, but just 0-1 input. And that's how they navigate web. Then there are screen readers, voiceovers, also something called braille displays. Some users might also be zooming into the website to understand the content better because they have some sort of size disability. So there are multiple ways, multiple assistive technologies, and hence we need to make sure that we are creating our web pages in proper way so they are accessible to all of our users. And also the very important reason is the web was accessible by default, but when we don't use proper coding guidelines, when we don't use proper semantic HTML and stuff like that, we tend to make the web inaccessible. So we as developers are contributing to web being more and more inaccessible. So it is specifically our responsibility that we make web more accessible again for everyone. As per WHO or World Health Organization, around 15% of world's population lives with some form of disability. And now this 15% translates to around 1 billion people around the world. This is a lot of number, and it might in fact be more. And there are different types of disabilities, which are mainly like visual, auditory, motor, and cognitive. And they are categorized further into 3 different categories, like permanent, temporary, and situational. So for example, if I take, let's say, auditory disability. So if I am born deaf, or so I might be permanent disabled. But let's say something happened in my ear, maybe I got operated or some infection happened and I still cannot hear properly, then it could be some sort of temporary disability. Then again, I can hear totally fine, but let's say I'm trying to maybe watch YouTube tutorial, or maybe I am trying to go through this session in a crowded environment, then I won't be able to hear properly. Then it is called situational disability. So while WHO says that 15% of world's population lives with some form of disability, I read this statement somewhere, and I think that yeah, it is correct, that 100% of us might be situationally disabled at one or different time in our life. So accessibility is actually for disabilities, and it is also for beyond disabilities, like a user who might be facing some technical issues, like maybe slower connection. So if we have a good performant website, and again, performance is a form of disability, we can say that. So they can be helped. Then smaller devices. So if someone is trying to access our content on smaller devices, smaller mobile tablets, so if our website is responsive, then it is accessible for them, properly accessible for them. Situations, we already discussed, noisy environment or maybe a brighter environment. Then there are progressive disabilities again, so like the disabilities which come with aging, like eyesight starts decreasing, hearing capability starts decreasing, motor disabilities happen, the joints get weak, and so on. So all of these come under the area. Accessibility is a pretty big umbrella, and so in a nutshell, we can also say that accessibility benefits everyone, and it's very important for everyone. Now, accessibility has some specific like official guidelines also. So like by web, World Wide Web Consortium, so we have specific principles called WCAG, which are Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And these guidelines are divided into 4 different principles, or I can say based into 4 different principles, which are acronymed as FORE. So this is something which I like to say, because this is how I try to tackle any problem which I have. Like if I'm trying to work on something, or I'm trying to create anything on web, like anything, any content on my web page, I try to think that if it validates my FORE principles, which means that whatever we are creating, first of all, is it perceivable? Perceivable means like, can user perceive that content or that stuff via any of their senses, like either via sight, either via hearing, either via touch. So can they perceive the content? Yes. Then can they operate on it? So like let's say there was a button. So first of all, can they perceive? So like can they see it's a button, or can they hear that, okay, there's a button there? And then can they operate on it? Means now that they know that it's a button, can they click on it? So can they click on it via keyboard, just by keyboard, by pressing the enter or space bar? Can they activate that button? Understandable. Understandable means that whatever the content is there, can the user understand it? So for example, a very classic example here would be form elements. So there are different form input elements which we have. Have we labeled them correctly? Because if we don't label them correctly, the screen readers will not pronounce or not announce the label properly for that input. Then the user, if they cannot see that they won't be able to understand that what they have to fill in that input box. So are the users able to understand whatever we are creating? Then robust. Robust means that the web is changing and there are lots of new things coming, new technologies coming up. But whatever we create, it should be, if we focus on all the standard guidelines, like HTML5 is currently the standard guidelines for creating the documents, web documents. Now, if we follow those guidelines, then we can be sure that they are going to be robust for all different types of assistive technologies and different types of platforms which come up. So we need to think from these whenever we are creating something. And so now to the main topic of the talk today, HTML and semantics. So quickly, what is HTML or hypertext markup language? So it is basically a core markup language like by World Wide Web. And it is basically, you can say that's the most basic building block of web. You can create a whole web page by just using HTML. You don't need anything else, just create HTML and you have created a web page, right? So it's the most basic building block, and its main purpose is to define the meaning of the contents and what is the contents and what is the content, what's the meaning and what's the structure of it. So, and what it is not, that is also something which we need to get it out of the way, is that it's not something which we use as a styling or for presentation of our website. So this is one of the very common mistakes, because many a times we see there are errors in people use heading levels as a styling element instead of a structure element. So headings are there for a meaning. They have certain semantics or meaning attached to it. But we see that, okay, the font size is bigger and then maybe I should use H1. If it was not supposed to be H1, we still maybe end up using H1 and something like that. So wrong uses of HTML elements shouldn't happen just because we want to do some sort of styling. If we want to have bigger font sizes, we should use CSS instead of HTML. Instead of H1s, H2s, these should only be used when we really intend to use headings, like when they are really headings of that content. So this is also one of the very important things. So HTML is basically just what it declares, that what is the content and what is its relation with other contents, what's the structure of our web page, that is HTML. And the semantics in HTML. So what corresponds to semantics in HTML? So there are lots of HTML elements. So the semantics in HTML are, first of all the HTML elements like input, button, anchor tags, image, form elements, main, navigation, header, footer. There are lots. So they represent semantics. They represent meaning. Input means that user can input something. Form means there's a form, user needs to fill it. Button means user can push on it, like activate that, and so on. So to be honest, there are only two non-semantic HTML, I guess. It's like div and span. So they can be used for generic purpose. They are called generic elements. They are also called non-semantic HTML because they have not any meaning attached to them. So, and apart from HTML elements, there are also attributes for each HTML element, and they are also which provide semantics to that element or that content. For example, input read only. Here, read only is the attribute, and it says that, okay, this input is read only, so user cannot type into it. So this also provides a meaning or to it. Then the values of attributes. There are key value pairs of attributes. For example, input can have different types. It can have text, email, telephone, number, and so on, password. So these specifically say that what kind of data can be filled in that input. So this also defines that what kind of value can be in these input elements. So these are what define the semantics of in HTML. Then document object model and accessibility tree. So the document which we create, it's like it is represented in a tree structure in our browser, right? So we have something called document object model tree. So what is DOM? So it's logical structure of our document, and it's also a way in which our document can be accessed via maybe JavaScript, and it can be manipulated. For example, we can use document object in console, and we can create notes on it, and we can add and maybe remove some attributes. So These are different things which we can do. And if we take a look at just the structure, so it's kind of tree which starts at a root element, which is HTML, our main root element of our HTML document. And then it contains different things like HTML, like the elements. So all these HTML tags are basically the elements like title, anchor, h1. Then the attributes. So like this anchor tag has attribute href. So those are there. And then the nodes, text nodes, basically, which contains all the text or the content in that particular element. Then accessibility tree. So now this DOM tree, it is used to paint what we see in browser. So like if you are a sighted user, or whatever you see on a website, that is driven by DOM. But how do assistive technologies understand what is the content on our website? So they do not access DOM directly. For them, browser creates something which is called accessibility tree. So basically, accessibility tree is a subset of DOM tree, and it is actually created by that DOM tree where they remove certain information and they only keep some relevant information for those elements. And this information is passed to the assistive technologies. We'll see in a while. But it looks something like this, where only relevant information is there. So, and it's more, if you saw DOM tree and now if you see accessibility tree, it looks a little bit more readable, because you can now say that, okay, there was main, okay, something happened on my screen. Okay. So form, and then there is a radio button which has a name and a state is selected, and then there is a text which has a name of full name, and so on. So this is only information which is required by assistive technologies, and they pass it on. And how the whole things happen is, whenever we create our websites, we use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, any framework, library, anything, which basically translates everything to a DOM tree, which is used to create a website, which is visually rendered, right? And we can see it as a user. But it also creates accessibility tree. Now, this is which is passed on assistive technologies, and these assistive technologies depend upon accessibility tree to pass on the information to me as a user who is using assistive technology. So, for example, we can see, let's say, an example, maybe let me open up Amazon. Yeah, that's fine. If we inspect our web page, so these are all the elements, and by default, we see control. Yeah. So by default, we see it in this tree structure. Now, there is a way to see the accessibility tree or accessibility node of everything here. So if we go to this elements pane, and there is accessibility pane. In accessibility pane, we can see all the accessibility information of every different node. So for example, let me go and see maybe this Amazon.nl, which is an anchor. So now we can see here that what is exposed. So the name is Amazon.nl, and how it is calculated by one of these four things. Then the role of it, and also a state or kind of properties of it. Like, is it focusable? Yes, it is focusable. Again, it's an anchor, so it should be focusable, and it is focusable, so it's nice. So this is how the accessibility tree is shown. And I am currently in a Chrome browser, so you can see it in different browsers as well. But for today, we are just going to use Chrome browser. So, and here is, there's also a way in which we can enable full page accessibility. So now, instead of seeing all those HTML tags, now we see everything in terms of accessibility tree. This is a heading, it has a text, it's a link, it has a text, and so on. It's focusable. So all of these suddenly changes. So this is something which we can use to analyze and also understand like what is the information, and if the information is being passed properly onto the assistive technologies or not. So yeah. Okay, cool. Now, so we saw a bit of DOM and accessibility tree, and so I want to highlight one thing is like some of the common accessibility failures. So these are again audited by WhyArea, which is a non-profit organization, and they have this 1 million project where they take top 1 million websites of the world and they audit their home pages for accessibility issues. And again, these are all just automated tests. So they are not like automated tests can only cover 20 to 40% of total accessibility issues. But based upon that audit, these are the most common errors which are right now, and we can see of all different years, 22, 21, 20, and 19. And out of these 6 issues, the 5 of them are actually related to semantic HTML. So if we have them correct, we can fix like 5 of these issues. We can eliminate lots of these errors. So yeah, so let's see some examples now to see how we can fix these. But also, apart from semantic HTML, there's also something called WhyArea. So WhyArea is like it's an initiative, web accessibility initiative, and accessible rich internet application. So basically, what are these? They are used along with HTML to provide more semantics to whatever controls we build. For example, while we have controls for input, button, form, etc., there are some complicated things which we make, which might not have a dedicated input, dedicated element tags. So for those, we can use these WhyArea to make it more accessible. For example, there is you can create a navigation with hover and lots of menus and stuff like that, or a pop-up, although there is one which is coming, but still. So they can be, we can use different HTML elements and combine them to create all these complex, components. And there are different things in which we can use in WhyArea, like for example, roles. So we can assign roles to them. So roles can be of 2 different meanings. One could be what are the type of the widget. For example, if the widget is menu or slider or even a button. So if we are using a non-semantic HTML to create a button, maybe then you would like to put the role as button to say that, okay, this is a button. And then also we can use role to say the structure of the page. For example, if we are just using div, we need to say role equal to heading to say that, okay, this is a heading, and so on. Although it's good to use semantic HTML, but these are just examples to show that what are different things which we can use in ARIA. And then we can also set some properties. For example, if we are creating a widget which can be checked, unchecked, then there could be ARIA checked property on it. So if it's true, it says that, okay, this is checked right now, and so on. But again, thing with ARIA is that there is a very famous rule of ARIA, which is don't use ARIA if possible. So first try to go ahead and see if I can accomplish this task by using semantic HTML. If yes, go ahead, use that HTML element. And only if there is no HTML element available for that, then we go ahead and see this WhyArea, the ARIA roles and attributes. Now, again, it has a very nice authoring practices. So all the links are in, again, the slides, and you will get access to slides. So yeah, you will get to know of all these links. But there is very nice authoring practices, WhyArea authoring practices, where you can go and check for all the different elements, and you can read everything about it to create it. So it's a very nice read, a big read, yeah, but yeah, it's a nice read, I guess. Yeah. So yeah, that's there. Now let's take a look at examples. So the first one is, because we say that structure, so landmarks. Use landmarks for providing the structure of the web page which we are building. So landmarks are like, header, main, nav, footer, aside, and so on. And why these are important is because if we use just div and span for everything, the meaning, the structure would not be very well defined. And the users which use assistive technologies, they use these landmarks as a navigation. So we'll see in a while, but they use this to navigate between different parts. So for example, the screen reader, for example, they do not go on a web page and go on pressing tab to go to where they want to go. No, they have different shortcuts or different routers which they use to go through all the landmarks on the page to understand what is that on page, or different headings on the page, different links on the page. So there are different shortcuts for those, and they navigate through those. So if we provide proper landmarks, so they can be used by navigation by assistive tech users. They can directly switch to heading or main or maybe navigation part and so on. So they can quickly find what they are looking for, and they can navigate between these different parts or structures of our web page. And so, use the landmarks to define the structure and the major sections of the page instead of just using div and span. However, there is a catch. Let's not go ahead and make every div or things as main or footer, aside, and so on. So if we, like, for example, if we create 10 aside elements on our page, then again it may be more overwhelming for the user. So we need to keep them to a minimum so that we provide a nice navigation for our users, and obviously meaningful navigation for the users. And then the headings. So like headings are from H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, and S6 basically, and we should be using heading to contain kind of an outline of the page. So for example, remember, like we have a long article, then we have something called table of contents, right? So like table of contents, where you can see that, okay, what are the more important points, then the sub points, and so on. And we can grasp a bit of what is the content, and then we can again jump into relevant section if we want. So headings can be thought in just that way. They are kind of similar to your table of content of your whole page. So again, there are different rules when we are creating headings, that we should not be skipping levels. So for example, if we have a H1, then the next heading for a content would be a H2, because that's the next relevance of your content, and then H3. But if we go from H1 directly to H4 and it's skipping, then it's again could be confusing for the users. And also, which I mentioned in the start also, do not use these for styling. Only use this for the headings. Okay, so let's see an example. So this is a very basic example by, again, W3 website, but this is a page where you can click on this and see that what are different landmarks. So we can say specifically the landmarks, like this is a header which has a roll up banner, navigation, main, and these are two aside complementary. And then we have a footer, which is the role is content info for the footer. So we can easily think that where we want to go. And again, if I want to start my hide this, let me start a screen reader to show you quickly the rotor. So
banner, okay. Skip to content, menu hub, collapsed button, W3C logo, image, heading level 1, are your landmarks, window and spots, menu. Heading level
I
1,
think it won't show in this screen, but okay.
System has new window and spots, menu. Links menu.
Okay, so I cannot show because I have two screens and it is coming on my main screen. But basically, I wanted to show that how these rotors look like. Let me show.
Screen share, Zoom webinar, window, voiceover off.
Q. Let me quickly share anyways this screen, and then I will show. Okay, maybe this is the current screen, and maybe if I go again and start my voiceover, so it can say
banner,
that
skip to content, menu hub, collapsed button, W3 links menu, system has new window.
So now you can see that I have the rotor open, and now it only lists all the links on this website which I was showing. And if I move between these are the landmarks, so I can go and go in this. So let's say I directly want to go to the landmarks complementary, which is aside. So I can go here and press enter, and it will take me directly there.
Tables menu.
Then there was a table, so it shows up.
Controls menu.
If you have forms, it shows up. we have headings and it shows up, and you can see that there are levels which show up like ARIA landmarks and then sectioning, and then we have landmarks and related documents. So basically these are used to navigate between the websites. So I'll just stop it now.
Voiceover off.
And I will again switch to my other screen. Let's talk to. Cool. So yeah. So these were headings and landmarks. Then labels. So whatever we have on our screen, on our browser, right? So if I'm using screen readers, I should be able to hear it to understand what it is. So labels are very important, which are names or anything. So like any element's name or the label plus the role, what its role is, that makes a complete user context. So for example, there's a button. So what is the name of button? If someone says me only button, so I don't know what that button does. So I need to know if it's a submit button and they say that submit button. So I will know that, okay, if I press this button, it's going to submit my form and so on. So these both are very important for user context. If the name is not present, then only the role will be announced, right? Like a button, link, and so on. So without name, we don't know what is the intention. So we won't be aware of context and we don't know what to do. Again, it's not operable and understandable, right? It fails it. So what are different things which we can like name or which we need to think that, yeah, we should be naming these? So first and foremost, the most important thing is document the whole page. It should have a name, right? So how do you give it a name? So we use it by adding title in the head tag. So in the HTML element, we have a head in which we add a title. So for example, I have an example here. So here I have not added any title. So if I have no title, if you see this title, the title thing, which comes in your browser for every web page. So here it actually shows the URL right now. So when a user comes here via screen reader, let's say, so we are going to only focus on a screen reader today. So when they come here, this URL will be read. So is it giving you any context what this web page is about? No, right? But if we see this, we know that, okay, it's explore accessibility button example. So I know that, okay, this particular tab contains a website which has this title. So to add title, we can add a title. And so if I add a title here, basically, I should title, right? And if I add a title, and it will show me like a semantic HTML, for example. Yeah, so now title, and now this document has a name, and this is more relevant to the user now. Then image alternative text. So we have lots of maybe media on our website. We can have images, and we use images in different ways. If we don't add alternative text to it, so if someone cannot see, what will they understand of that image, right? So we should never skip the alt text. So we have alt attribute on image tag, and there are different rules for it. We won't go in detail, but if you are using, if the image has no information, or like there is extra information about it on below, like if you think the information is repetitive, then we can always add alt equal to empty string. Or if you are using image to show something to the user, to give some information to the user, do add the proper alt text in the alt attribute, but never ever skip alt text. So for example, let's say on my website somewhere I have this image of this book, which is Inclusive Components by Hayden Pickering. Now, if I use this code like image source equal to some, gibberish ID, because this is how it's generated when we fetch it from some server. But so this image has this src. So if it has no alt, how will it be read by the screen readers? So there are different screen readers who use different techniques. Like some of them skip, some of them just say image, some could say read out the source name, and now source name could be big long hash or something like that. So it makes no sense to the user, and it makes it highly inaccessible. So instead, if I had text just below this book, which says that inclusive components by Hayden Pickering, then maybe I will just remove this alt equal to empty strings, because same information is available. So I don't want to make it repetitive for the user. But if I am relying on this image as maybe link or button or something like that, so I would like to add the proper alt so that screen readers can announce this to the users. So yeah, never skip alt. Then buttons and links. Again, expanding on that. So how do we understand what a button does or what a link does, right? When we add some label or name to it. For example, let's say a button example. So this is a button which says add to basket. The code could be something like this. And since this text is available, so screen reader will pronounce it, that add to basket button. So I know that if I press this button, this is going to add whatever the contents are into the basket. What if I'm using an icon, just an icon and no text for add to basket? So what will happen in that case? Okay, so what will happen in that case? So let's say, okay, I write again, okay, button type submit. And what do? Like, I don't write any text, right? I just go ahead and add an image or an icon or whatever. Like something is there, which is going to render this image. But there is no information for the screen reader. So what are they going to announce? There is no text. So they will just say button. Again, no information to them. Very wrong practice. Instead, what we can do is, there are multiple ways. You can also add an alt to image, to be honest. You can add a title. And what you can also do is something called ARIA label. So this is where ARIA comes into picture again. You can add ARIA label and you can say that, hey, so this is going to be the level of the button, and add that text there. So in this case, this will expose this information to assistive technology and they will pronounce this, right? So for example, here in this is kind of a button, but if you see, there's button type submit and an image, but there is no alt. If I see accessibility tree for this, the accessibility node, the name is empty. The name is empty. Okay, I'm at the image, but let's go to maybe button. Again, yeah, the name is empty. It is button. It is focusable, yes, but what to pronounce? Nothing. So they will just say button because that's a role. So again, always add labels for your buttons. And similarly for link, if you have an anchor, you can similarly add ARIA labels for them and so on. Then label form elements. So whenever we are creating form elements, there are different ways in which we can label those elements, right? So I have seen these real examples. So yeah, because it's just a text, right? So people tend to use span, or maybe if they want a new line, they use div so that it by default makes it block and so on. Or we also use label. Label is the correct thing to use here, right, for an input. And we use label and then we use input. But what's wrong? What's wrong here in second one is that it does not identify that this label is associated to which input. Like we need to tell it that, hey, this label is for a certain input. So these both examples are incorrect. Don't use span or something else. And also if you are using label, don't use just label. How to use it? So either we can wrap the input inside the label, right? So if we get wrap, then we don't need to add anything like for and so on. It will be known to the assistive technology that this email is the label for this input. Or the other way is, if we, due to styling or due to some complex code, we can always have them on separately and not nested. If we are not doing that, then add a for label to this ID. So for example, this currently contains maybe one is span and one is label, right? So this is my HTML. So come on, give me this. Yeah, so this input, so there's no name to it. This is a text box, but again there is no name. I know nothing much about this. And same with phone, I guess. There is label, but yeah, what it does nothing. So yeah, but if we go ahead, and also one important thing, if I click on name or phone, nothing is happening, right? So but there's another good thing which happens when we add a for attribute. So maybe I can just put this control inside it. Like we of course need more. This is not a valid HTML. You need type, value, and stuff like that, but just making it a very basic one. Now this phone, let's inspect it. Now, if you see this phone, I'm on text box, but it has a name called phone, which is coming from a label, and it is a wrapped label. So it gives you all the information. And also the second thing, if I click on email, nothing is happening. But if I click on phone also, the text box gets highlighted. So it gives you also keyboard accessibility. It gives lots of accessibility, like focus accessibility, I can say, in this matter. So it's very nice to use Semantic. They provide a lot to us. So yeah, always label the forms properly so that the information passes on properly to the assistive technologies. Then a very important thing again is keyboard accessibility. So we have content on our websites, but we also have actions which we want our users to do. Maybe we are having some business, we are selling books, we are selling courses, or we are having a conference or something, and we want users to sign up. Everything we want them to perform some actions like click on buttons, and we want them to navigate from one place to another. Again, links, then input. So buttons, inputs, we want to get some information from them so they can input something, anchor tags, and so on. These are all different things in which we want user to perform some action. So when we use semantic HTML, tags like again button, input, anchor, and so on, they provide out of the box keyboard accessibility. So what do I mean by that? What do I mean by that is I don't have to write any extra code, but whenever I use button or anchor input, I am getting these features, like they are tabbable. When I am using keyboard, when we use keyboard, just keyboard for navigation, all these elements will be tabbable. They will be focusable by default. And they will also be keyboard operable, which means that we can use just keyboard to activate them. And also, since they're semantic, they will be announced properly by the screen reader. So for example, for this example, let's go to div and button thing, because now what we can do is that we can use buttons to create button, but sometimes we have different styles and complex things. We end up using divs. So let's say here, this button is created by using div on the screen, and we have register now and cart as normal button tags. Now, if I'm just using my keyboard to navigate, I press tab and you see a focus ring on register now button right now. If I press tab again, because maybe I first need to log into buy, but it just skipped it. Why? Because it was created by div, and divs are non-semantic HTML. They do not come with these focusable properties. So it's totally inaccessible. So again, the best thing is to use semantic HTML. But let's see an alternative, like if we are using div and we want to make it fully accessible, what all we have to do. So for this, first we have to do is we have to add a tab index. What tab index does is it brings your element into the tab order, and add tab index equal to 0. And now this second one is actually accessible. So here I can tab and the focus came up. Why? Because I added tab index equal to 0. Now, since it's a div, it has generic role by default, but I want a screen reader to know that it's a button so that they can announce it to the user that it's a button. So we will have to add a role to it. And then also, apart from that, now we have button, role, and tab index, but still, since it's a div, you still cannot press the keys and activate it because they are divs, and divs are not supposed to be keyboard accessible. So for that, we have to write extra JavaScript. By default, what we do is for any button that we add a click handler to our buttons, that, hey, this is a click handler. This should happen when user clicks on it. But now, since it's a div, we will have to add an extra key down handler to say that if the key is space bar or enter. So these are again official guidelines that how the button can be activated. So a button can be activated when you press a space bar or when you press an enter key. So I need to write specific code that if user has pressed these keys, then go ahead and do whatever you wanted to do when the button was clicked. So we need to write so much logic to just create a button because we did not use a semantic HTML. So these are the extra things which come by default when we use semantic HTML. And this is how it makes our life easier. And also it makes it accessible by default. Like for example, if I use div, and normally we don't test with keyboards and screen readers, which is again we should do, but most of the times we don't do. And so we never go and check if it was accessible by keyboard, and we just ship it to production, right? So again, it was working with mouse and we just shipped it to production. This is how most of the inaccessibility comes in our web. So because we forget, and if we use semantic HTML, we don't need to forget because we don't need to remember first time. So yeah, it's good. And again, yeah, I've shared this website link also. There are some examples there which you can see for more HTML accessibility. And yeah, so for keyword accessibility, again, semantic HTML provides out-of-the-box keyword accessibility. This was the main point which I wanted to share. Then we are ending it. So we saw some of the examples and why and how semantic HTML makes our websites more accessible. I want to end by saying this point that we need to keep testing everything that we are building. Now, testing is again a very big topic in itself. So I have just covered just very basic points, like you can test using keyboards, screen readers, or voiceovers, or there are different browser extensions and dev tools which we can use to test for our accessibility. There are also automated tools like AxCLI and JustAx, SeleniumX, and so on, which we can actually write tests and integrate into our CI/CD pipelines, and they will test for some automated accessibility. There are multiple screen readers and they are for all of our devices. So I really recommend that either install it, or if you have already built in, use it and test your web content with it to see if it is accessible. And starting with screen readers can be a little overwhelming. So there are different materials available which you can use to see the different shortcuts and the ways in which we can test using screen readers. Then different browser tools and extensions. Some of them which I really like are, first of all, dev tools of any browser. They always contain good tools, and like accessibility pane and accessibility tree and so on. Then there is Lighthouse, which you can use to audit for accessibility. There is also Axe extension, which you can install. There is a Wave plugin, which can be used to test for audit for accessibility of your website. And to conclude, so whenever we are creating anything, we should always think from user's perspective, and specifically for this talk, always use semantic HTML, try to use semantic HTML, and it will help us to provide the proper structure, navigation, and behavior of the page and all of its contents. And don't forget to test for accessibility. We should be focusing on accessibility just as everything else. And I do have action items for you, is that if you learn something, incorporate it in your day-to-day work, and also pass on these learnings. And the main reason the web is highly inaccessible is also because we are not talking enough about it. So we need to talk a lot about it. We need to talk with everyone in our team about it. And that's how we spread the word and awareness. More and more people should be on board on making the web accessible. These are some of the resources which you can go through, and these are pretty nice, some official documentations. And also this is a very nice talk by actually Hide on semantics and how to get them right. So this is last year talk, but it is pretty nice information on semantics as well. So I do recommend to go through that. And then there is a website by Emmanuel called HTML. So I really like it because it also, he does audits of websites, and then he puts all the ways in which we should not be using HTML, right? Like those are wrong ways of using HTML, and that leads to inaccessibility. So it's very good website, and it has lots of good information. Focus on HTML, so do check that also. And then this is a website which I use for demoing the button and div, and it contains some other examples as well for accessibility. So yeah, basically you can, if you want, you can, scan this QR code or go to my website anvadakumari.com/talks. There you can find resources for talks and also my further talks. And also a very important thing, there is also a feedback form, and I always appreciate if the audience gives me feedback, because I would like to do better. And also you can give me feedback on how was this talk, if you felt something was missing, or if you wanted something more. You can also write to me if you want me to talk about some other topics or some in-depth on some of the topics, and I will take them into account. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Anuradha, for that excellent presentation. One of the questions that we've been asked, I'd just quite like to ask you about this, is what's your recommended system for regulated, automated, or manual accessibility reviews?
Regular, automated, and manual accessibility. Okay, so again, there are different ways in which we test, right? So like I showed also. So first and foremost is keyboard. So what I do, I will tell you as a front-end developer, how do I test for my website accessibility. First, keyboard, everything should be reachable by keyboard, operable by keyboard, and so on. Then you open the screen readers and see if the content makes sense, if the landmarks are in order, and if the headings, structure, and all make sense. Then Lighthouse audit, I always use Lighthouse and Axe DevTools. They're really nice. Actually, Lighthouse is pretty more simplified. So just go ahead, open your website. You can do it today also. Go ahead, open your website and open your DevTools and do the Lighthouse audit. I think I didn't show. Actually, it's so for example, for this website again, there is this Lighthouse tab wherein you can say that, hey, I want to check for accessibility for desktop device. You analyze it, it reloads the page, and it gives you a list of what are the issues on that. And actually, I should have shown here because this is totally inaccessible website which I created. So yeah, let me analyze this one, and it will gives you a list of issues which are kind of quick wins for you, to be honest. These are quick wins because these are automated tests and these you can fix. So like buttons don't have accessible name, right? This button. So you go to add ARIA label or all text to it and it should be done. Then image, again, HTML does not have lang attribute is one. So these are very quick wins which you can do. But again, they are just a subset, 20 to 40% of issues. You need to test using keyboard, screen readers, and also if you are in like a business, so you have a you are working in a corporation and you have a pretty nice product coming up, then I also suggest using user testing. So there should be user testing. There are dedicated organizations which have testers which test for websites. So like they have disabled users, user base which can test for your website and let you know how was it. So there are different organizations which do this also. So yeah, there are different ways to do this. I hope that helps a bit.
And then just one final question before we round up is what linting tools would you recommend for accessibility?
Yes, there are some linting tools. So for any framework which you work in, so I work mostly with React, and React has a J6, I guess. LEJX6 should be LEJX6, ESLint, basically ESLint plugin for, yeah, this one. So you can use this and incorporate into your ESLint, and you will get all the linting things. And similar is for Vue as well. I know for sure that there is one for Vue. Should be ESLint Vue, something like that. Yeah, ESLint Vue. I haven't used this though, but this looks similar. And there should be something similar for everyone which you use. Yeah, and I'm not sure if X has something. Does X? I don't think X will have ESLint, but do we have something called X ESLint plugin as well, which I definitely have not used. But yeah, so there are linting plugins. So React one I totally recommend because I use it. Vue I have not used, and this also I have not used. But if you are using React, totally go for the React JSX plugin.
Okay, great. Thank you to the audience for your questions. Really appreciate that. And thank you, Anuradha, of course, for your fantastic presentation. Just a reminder to all registrants, you can find a recording of this later on YouTube. We'll be uploading it there, and also in a follow-up email. Anuradha also had some resources and some links in her presentation. I'll also be sending those over in a follow-up email. So don't worry, we've got you covered as far as that's concerned. And that concludes our meetup episode for today. Thank you very much, everybody, for watching. And thank you, Anuradha, once again for hosting for us. And hope to see you all again in a future meetup. We have one next week, just as a reminder. You can sign up on blog.logrocket.com. And thank you all for joining us, and have a good day.
Thank you for having me. Bye, everyone.